Welcome in and welcome to the Legacy Right. We got a special guest. We're two agorists, but you know what? Sometimes you got to get the perspective from the partyarchy, and we're gonna have Mike Ter Maat on, 2024 Libertarian Party candidate for president, and I think he has some good things on his platform. I really wanted to collect his perspective. I know Andrew does too. But before that, Andrew, I have to
Yeah.
do the plug. I have to intro and spin out for my cousin. He's starting small business. He wants to branch out because you know what? It's kind of a pain in the ass to go out there and work for the man or try to find jobs, and you just want to work for yourself. So
Yeah.
he's got a millwork job, millwork, woodworking, handcrafted accessories and knickknacks, from coasters to cutting boards, you name it. And then he'll even come to you because he's trying to start a business in construction. He's in Greater Cincinnati, Ohio, Southeastern Indiana, but at the same time, he's not. He'll definitely come to you if you got a construction project for him. So he makes some money. You make your dreams go round, and all you have to do is go to fanghornforesters.com. That's fanghornforesters.com, like Fanghorn, the leader of the Ents, Lord of the Rings, and we are Ents. He's still an Ent by last name. So check out fanghornforesters.com, and let's start some business. So until then, let's get to the show, and welcome aboard, Mr. Ter Maat. So thank you for
Thank you.
coming.
You will call me Mike, of course. Congratulations and good luck to your cousin. I know that when I struck out on my own with a partner, the two of us back in, I guess, 2002, it was one of the best decisions that we ever made. Being on your own and running your own business, it's a tremendous amount of work, and it can be very scary, especially when between the
Mm-hmm.
two of you, you're trying to figure out how you're going to put four kids through college. But it is extremely rewarding and it stretches you as a human. So I'm a big believer in entrepreneurialism in general.
Yeah, same. I think it's like it's a benefit. It's scary because you're on your own and you're kind of full fledged with the market. And I'm right now. I'm even more scared from my brother because I heard that he's an attorney.
Yeah.
But he just got out of the prosecutor's office. Young man was in the prosecutor's office for about 3.5 years,
Good
and
experience.
yeah, it is. I imagine he worked for a big firm for about 8 months, then went to the prosecutor's office, back in old home, small town, and now he's off doing his own thing. And he just went into private practice with another attorney. So I'm a little scared on that one because I saw how my dad was when he did his. My dad was an attorney as well, so
And
he
he's going
did.
to do criminal defense work.
He's gonna do all of it. I think he's doing all of it for the most part. So
He's in a small town. Well, good luck to him. It's very exciting.
no, it is. So I mean, and that's where we'll start actually. I think you think yeah. So how what I look at like living in a small town like me, like where I'm at. I'm still in a small town. Andrew is in a tourist trap outside of Myrtle Beach, so he kind of sees the business booming at certain peaks. But I see small towns kind of dwindling, because just there's everybody's leaving. Either everybody's
Yeah.
leaving or it's just been forgotten and it's just hard. And businesses are crumbling. Governments or small governments are relatively just so corrupt that it's just I don't know what else to think. At least from my perspective, that it's just all about you getting the public office, sort of just to suck off the public tit, and that's about it. It's where
Well,
it
that is
stops.
a huge part of it. A lot of what we observe with the small towns is sort of churn. Some are going up, some are going down. One of the problems we have in the United States is we have a long history of our governments subsidizing certain businesses.
Mm-hmm.
And so eventually, when they go under, as most industries do eventually, but they tend to go under in a harder, more rapid, more stark, more falling off the cliff way when the government's been involved, because so often it's a matter of holding back competition. The automobile industry is obviously the most stark example, but we've got lots of examples in the industry of providing energy as well, as you guys well know. But for example, in the automobile industry, as a stark example, we had towns all over Detroit in support of all over Michigan in support of Detroit auto manufacturing, all of which were being protected by the federal government from competition from abroad. And when finally those floodgates opened for a combination of greater competition from abroad, more different nations figuring out how to compete with our markets, and the federal government just not being able to hold that back, Detroit tanked in a hurry, and all of those towns in Michigan that were feeder businesses into the industry failed as well, which is why you see so many towns so messed up in the Midwest and in Michigan in particular.
Yeah, like I live not too far from Cincinnati, obviously. So like you got like
Which
Middletown.
side of the border are you on? Are you in
I am on
Ohio?
the I'm on the Indiana side. So, but it's still OH. So, because I'm a Buckeye. but
That a
like
boy.
I, but I've seen like you go into like Middletown, Ohio, not far from Cincinnati and Butler County, and it used to be a little steel industry, a lot of Rust Belt from west to east, east to west, however you want to look at it, and you would never think like you look at Middletown, small little, just right in smack dab in the middle of nowhere, in between Dayton and Cincinnati. But
Yep.
because of all the issues, like you would think it's just one big ghetto. Like it's just because it's just gone so downfall. Like,
Yeah,
um,
industries change much more rapidly than our
mhm,
culture does, and families have a hard time making that decision to leave town, which in so many instances is in the long run the right decision, but it is a wrenching one and
mhm,
very difficult to pull off, particularly if you don't have the resources in the first place. The reason you want to leave town is because you don't have the opportunities in town. And these are
Yeah.
exactly the families that therefore don't
mhm,
have the resources to up and move. And so often in these towns, you don't have the educational resources to prepare you for somewhere else to move to. So
mhm,
it's really a double problem, I think. It's rough. It's a shame. And of
mhm,
course, the overall change in our economy from manufacturing to communications to services more generally, really rough. In the grand scheme of
mhm,
things, we may look back on the past 100 years or so and say that was a very tough time. We really don't know the extent to which our economy is going to have to go through so many wrenching changes in the future, of course. But I
mhm.
hope it won't require so much physical move, right? I'm hopeful that in the next 100 years, even to the extent to which we see a lot of churn in industries and businesses, it won't require so much leaving people behind, leaving towns behind.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, and that it takes time. It really does. Like you got to have a plan, and you just got to keep working through it. So, but I guess like for a question right here, um, it sounds like we need to build more on community. We need options, and we need to compete with one another as well as cooperate. So I'm going to take a Andrew book right here because then I'm going to jump right into it at the early onslaught. We usually cover it at the end, but since we're on this, um, the option level, do you think bringing in um, certain certain options like crypto, having that effect be a good way of maybe helping kind of speed up people trying to get back on track, or communities trying to get back on track rather than a monetary monopoly?
I think the right answer from our point of view as libertarians is that we don't know, and
Mm-hmm,
therefore we need to let it happen because it very well could be a big accelerator to the development of our next phase in our economy. At some point in the next several years, we are going to hit an inflection point in the development of a smart economy run largely online in terms of moving, tracking goods and services. It's going to change the way that we engage in contracting, the way that we manage human resources, the way that we are able to monetize certain elements of information. It's going to change a lot of the ways that we do business. The ability to run contracts, for example, on blockchain technology is going to change a great deal in our economy. We
Hmm.
are definitely going to need cryptocurrency to play its role. We don't know which currency. We
Hmm.
don't know what the characteristics of the winning currency will require, but we do know from basic principles that we need the government to stay out of it for a couple different reasons. One is to allow the economy to develop the way that it should most efficiently. We don't want the government to preclude the development of one of these currencies. And we don't want the government to issue its own currency, which would crowd out the ability of private sector currencies to compete. It may well be that the US dollar remains for a gazillion years the dominant currency in the world. Time will tell.
Hmm.
Right now, there's nobody even coming anywhere near being able to propose a challenge to the dollar. But what we don't want is for the Federal Reserve, for example, to issue its own digital currency, which would have the doubly bad effects of crowding out a private sector currency. But it
Hmm.
would also create an incentive for the Fed to put in place rules and regulations that would favor its own currency at the expense of the development of other currencies. And this is arguably just as important. And of course, the other aspect of a central bank issued digital currency is that it would give a backdoor to the government to look at every transaction that anyone ever makes, and not just meta characters of the transactions, not just
Hmm.
metadata, but everything about the transaction itself and the ability to control your
Hmm.
access to being able to conduct transactions. And I don't think that anyone really believes that the Fed would withstand a request for data from the Treasury Department or the Justice Department or the IRS or anybody else. And so we believe that for all of these reasons, we need to keep the Fed out of it.
Yeah, very good. Like, it's all about controlling your own self through controlling your own money, and I mean, that's just the way that we have to try to figure things out. There's obviously not going to be people that can completely do that. So how do we kind of reach out to people, more so to kind of educate them and get them on the realization that, hey, this system we're in right now is not working for the benefit of you. Like, how do we get out? Because there's a lot of people out there that's not either, they're either not ready or they don't want to hear it, or they're too busy that they don't really care.
Well, I think there's a couple aspects to it. One is political, one is, for example, technological, as we were just discussing. I think the technological aspect, to take the easier one first, the technological aspect will spread itself. I think that
Hmm.
there'll be uh, any number of participants in the smart economy in the future that'll have plenty of incentive to recruit people into the economy, to spread education. It'll be a generational change, right? People over a certain age will find it more difficult than youngsters who will grow up in the smart economy. You know, I
Hmm.
look at other examples of communications sea changes in the United States. Uh, for example, moving to an economy in which everybody participated in the banking system, you know, starting 100 years ago, so many people were unbanked, and that's really not the story anymore. Most people now are able to access all of their financial information online.
Hmm.
The adoption of mobile technology was obviously very, very rapid. businesses had plenty of incentives to make it easy for everybody. And I think that that'll be the same for the adoption of artificial intelligence as well as for blockchain technology. So I'm very optimistic about it. What I worry more about is I think where you were going, which is the political challenge of waking people up to the idea that theirs is a government that does not operate in their interest, that is not honest, that has no interest in pushing power down in a decentralized fashion to local decision makers. Plenty of politicians have no incentive whatsoever, no interest whatsoever in allowing you to become empowered, make decisions for yourself. As I say, as a libertarian, live your life by your own standards. Politicians are, well, I would argue politicians have always, since the dawn of creation, had an interest in accruing power to themselves. But that phenomenon does seem to be increasing, accelerating, particularly in the context of the two big political parties, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. They have left behind what used to be their political agenda. Now, the Democrats' number one objective is keeping Republicans out of power, and Republicans' number one objective is keeping Democrats out of power.
Yeah.
And we know that this is where authoritarianism comes from in a democracy. In a democracy with ostensibly relatively democratic processes and institutions, authoritarianism grows when politicians decide to manipulate you as voters, manipulate your fears to suggest that I need more power so I can keep that other idiot out of office and keep you safe. And this is a phenomenon that we witness increasingly in the United States.
It's almost like Emma Goldman, a very astute anarchist in her time, would say. One of her most famous quotes that you can find all over the place, people meme it, is like, if voting did anything, they would make it illegal. And I'm starting to see a lot of it, especially within the last decade, and especially on the national level, as everything's become so political, everything's kind of centralized and tunneled right into Washington, and nobody's really focusing on community. They're going to work, they're coming home, they're droned into television or social media, and then everything is just kind of just forced onto everything in your little echo chamber that you've created on your tribalist. I mean, your tribalist culture. I mean, it's really like, as great as the internet and technology is, it really seems that like social media has been one of the biggest drivers of just keeping people down and out on the issues, which is really just to live and be left alone and be with your family and work with other people. So, I mean,
well, I agree with you. The communications revolution in
Mm.
terms of social media and media in general has really allowed a flourishing of tribalism that is extremely unhealthy and feeds the idea that we can survive with a two-party system, each one merely battling the other. Each one has formed its little communication, as you say, echo chamber, but they're little tribalistic methods of communicating and fostering their little political communities. And you're right, all of the power is increasingly pushed toward the top by the media, largely the legacy media that we're all looking forward to completely failing. It has been failing for the past 2 decades, and we're excited about it disappearing completely soon. But I do worry about the effects of social media, particularly with the government playing such a large role in controlling how the social media companies are able to participate in our communications economy. I worry about that. I worry about that very much. I know that you guys do too.
Yeah.
And speaking of communications, Andrew, you have a question about his thoughts on federated networks?
Oh yeah, sure. Well, with the centralization of modern platforms, what are you familiar with federated networks are?
Yeah.
Okay, just want to make sure before I move forward.
Well,
For anybody, yeah.
nonetheless, I don't know if your listeners are.
Okay, yeah. That's, federated network. Just about to say, federated networks are a decentralized social media platform, so that people who like particular types of content can associate. Say you have an echo chamber
Hmm.
who have a certain point of view can associate with that echo chamber, and the people who are allergic or not interested in that point of view can mute it, but it still exists on on a different network. So it's for people who are interested in only pure ideas versus polluted ideas. They can coexist in a society without having to directly resort to censorship at the core level. What do you think about the long-term effects of something like that?
Well, I think in the long term, we need as much competition as possible, and competition is sometimes undermined when we have look, in the old days, competition was undermined by what we used to call trusts, right?
Yeah,
Federations controlling
Hmm.
multiple businesses within an industry to stifle competition, to control pricing, to control distribution. So in some sense, everything that's new, we have seen before. So we need as granular a level of competition as possible. I would be optimistic that in the future we will continue to have a number of platforms, a number of different technologies that provide the number of channels that we need. But what I fear is that that has to be similarly reflected in other contexts, particularly in a political context. Because what I fear is that in politics, if you only have two big parties in the United States,
yeah,
you have a lot of nations around the world that also don't have competitive political environments, and they have similar communication problems. They have similar lack of communication competition. So in the United States, having just two parties, I fear that that is going to set up a lot of our communications infrastructure for a long period in the future
Hmm.
without real competition among a greater number of channels, because those channels seem to coagulate around the different political choices that people perceive themselves to have. And so I don't know that it's a technological problem so much as a political problem. The other thing that I think that we need to see emerge, and I believe that we will, is greater individual control over the management of our communication channels. As an example, we have social media platforms that are huge. There are certain natural monopolies that come with certain types of networking. So it's natural that you would see Twitter, X, blow up to a ridiculously huge size. We saw Facebook blow up to an insanely huge size, right?
Hmm.
These are relatively natural phenomena, and we appreciate the fact that the two platforms compete with each other and with others, but each of those platforms has a tremendous latitude to suppress competition, to become a vehicle for government censorship. These are things to be avoided. And what I look forward to in the future is greater control by the end user in a technological sense. I do believe that we need reform of Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act so that we get the government out of the idea of being able to uh, pressure organizations that provide these platforms to engage in censorship. What we really need in the long run is for companies that provide social media platforms or any other communications platform to no longer have an incentive to participate in the communication itself.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, they need to be held accountable by courts, just like any other publisher, if they're going to be participating and controlling the content.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that when the government got into this business in 1996 of giving communications platforms carte blanche, a shield from liability in court to engage in any censorship they want, that was a real problem. That was stepping off of a curb.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that we appreciated in 1990. Certainly, I didn't in 96 foresee that the government would use this to exert such influence over social media companies. But we can, what we screwed up with law, we can unscrew up. We can take away their liability protection, thereby taking away their incentive to engage in censorship, and get these social media platforms back to the platforms that they ought to be without controlling the communications content, and let us as individuals control what information that we want to see. I believe that in the future, we will have a robust set of apps. If, for example, X and Facebook would create an open architecture for their platform interface with end users, we would see a robust competition among apps for each of us to use to control what content we want to see, what content we want not to see, what we want our kids to see, what we want our kids not to see. And we could have control over that in a way that would obsolesce any need for the government to participate in that. So that's an optimistic view of the future, but I think that we will get there. But a linchpin is getting the government out of the business of censorship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's always the hard pill to swallow, is trying to get go, because once government's expanded and gotten itself and everything, it's kind of hard to get it out. But I mean, but yeah, I like that aspect on the fact that social media companies have to be held accountable. But I would go even further and say, like, they need to be held accountable on the essence that, just like every one of these major companies, they're just getting too much subsidy. And so it gives them no incentive to really care about actually running the business for what it should be, which is a publisher on the establishment of creating a platform for a big old message board, basically, for people to gather and talk about. So yeah, I mean, I don't know how else to kind of go off with. Just get rid of the subsidy. So
yeah, you got to get government out of it, and it's a real challenge. It can be done, but it is a challenge. And to your point, Zach, we need to do a better job of waking people up to the awareness that government's participation in these industries has really screwed up the markets.
Mm-hmm. And then a conspiracy question, though. Are social media are social media companies an experiment for agencies like the NSA and the CIA to manipulate people's thought patterns?
Not at their root, but I do believe it is true that there are forces inside the government that are constantly looking for ways to learn how to use these platforms to manipulate people, and not just in the U.S. government, but around the world.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, we may eventually find out that there are governments that are better at this than ours in terms of manipulating their populations. We already know that there are plenty of governments around the world that engage in censorship that's even worse than the United States government. So I think it's clear that these social media platforms grew up for entrepreneurial reasons, but they represent opportunities for governments to manipulate their constituencies that are just so robust that tyrants just can't keep their hands off of them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, I like that, because I mean, they are. Everything starts within the market. It's just
Yeah.
they get so big that they eventually, in order, they want to keep themselves in the market. So what is the easiest route? You take on the contracts from government, you take in subsidy, you go from there. So yeah, I mean, you help with regulation writing so that regulations help you, but nobody can compete with you. So go away. I'm the top dog. So I mean,
Yeah,
and
that
that.
regulatory capture can be really
Hmm.
profound. And of
Hmm.
course, these social media companies, platforms, the way that they make their money is by pushing their monopolistic control. It's by maintaining their monopolistic positions in the markets. So to the extent to which they can gain regulatory capture of the federal government, that's their bread and butter. That's as important
Hmm.
as, arguably more important than being technologically savvy.
So we need to repeal every Supreme Court decision since the ratification of the 14th Amendment that says corporations are persons.
Well, we certainly need to get back to a constitutional form of government. I often argue that we live in a post-constitutional nation. I think that, you know,
Hmm.
it's the executive branch and legislative branch of the federal government of the United States have clearly left behind any pretense of adhering to the Constitution. But to your point, I think it's very interesting that the Supreme Court itself really, notwithstanding the last few years where one
Hmm.
might argue it's gotten slightly better,
Yeah.
nonetheless, over the past 200 years, it has been a freight train moving away from the Constitution. And I think that there is some irony there for an organization that purports to be the last defender of the Constitution. I think
Hmm.
it's it's bullshit of the highest order.
Hmm. Well, they say those who control the courts are going to be the ones that truly are in power, and we've actually seen it the last year and or the last couple of years with Israel. And I mean, is the Likud and or the Likud government that Netanyahu has created again since he's become, what is it? It's like the 1 billionth time he's been prime minister, I guess. So, but
It took
it,
several votes this time, but
yeah.
he finally was able to put the coalition together. And
Hmm.
you're right, one of their big
Hmm.
platforms of the Likud party, one of the big platforms of Netanyahu is to uh, reform the way that
Hmm.
their Supreme Court members are nominated and sustained.
Hmm.
One could argue that round or square, but clearly motivation behind it is to have greater political control.
Hmm. I mean, and it's been tried several times here, especially in the 30s with FDR. And I mean, like, yeah, those who control the courts, they end up being the ones that become the tyrants. I mean, Eastern
Yeah.
Europe has a lot of that. I mean, I'm sure that I don't know much, but I'm sure that if it's not the military, then it's the courts or it's both in a lot of countries in Africa. So I mean, yeah, it's just, I mean, corruption, absolute corruption corrupts absolutely. And one way is intertwined law with the interpretation of the law. So the law
And the
enforcement.
ability to enforce it
Hmm.
unilaterally, to your point, the courts
Hmm.
and militaries in so many ways are the least democratic of our institutions. And
Hmm.
so often we see this around the world that power runs through those institutions. And when they become corrupt, uh, they become large and powerful, and it's virtually impossible for other institutions in a democratic society to withstand that pressure.
Hmm. That and navigating closer and closer to some type of more popular vote on the political system, a more completely popular vote. I mean, of democratic processes. One reason why the founders didn't want us to be completely democracy, but at the same time, I also think they wanted to have their friends be the only ones to put people in power. But
What do you
I mean,
think the founders would say if they saw the state of our democratic institutions today?
oh, they throw up. Well, some of them would probably be, well, I mean,
Beyond joy.
all the Hamiltonians be like, this is exactly what I wanted. And then all the Jeffersonians be throwing up. But I mean, sadly to say, I
I
mean,
think things have gotten out of
yeah.
hand, even by the standards of Hamilton's desired projections.
hmm yeah, honestly, I think even he would be like, it's a
I
little
think
too
so.
far.
I
Yeah.
think so.
Because I mean, I know like the original, like speaking of central banks, like the original central bank was not a monopoly. There was some competition. It was more of a moderator within our monetary system. It was more to make it easier for land speculators to commission the federal government so that the government could sell land easily at a cheaper price, affordability, so that they could pay their bills without effectively raising taxes so much, which
Indeed.
then you fast forward. Go ahead, Andrew.
We had to take a break. We'll be back in just a second. Sorry about that. We're at
Oh,
a hard limit.
mm-hmm.
Well, Mr. President, I'm minded actually to quote the great American philosopher Murray Rothbard here, that the state is an institution of theft writ large. Tax is just about a system where politicians and bureaucrats steal money from their citizens to squander in the most disgraceful manner. This place is no exception. Fascinatingly, and I really don't know how you manage to keep a straight face when you're talking about tax evasion, the whole Commission and the Commission bureaucracy avoid their taxes. You don't pay taxes like citizens pay taxes. You have all sorts of special deals, composite tax rates, high tax thresholds, non-contributory pension schemes. You are the biggest tax avoiders in Europe, and here you sit pontificating. Well, the message is getting home to the people of the European Union. You're going to find that Eurosceptics are coming back in June in ever greater numbers. And I can tell you worse, as the people get your number, it won't be long before they storm this chamber and they hang you, and they'll be right.
Welcome back. Sorry for the break. And trying to figure out our difficulties so we don't have to keep doing this. But at the same time, make sure that you don't miss that little buffer that Andrew's going to put in between. It's going to be something interesting. I don't know. What is it going to be this week, Andrew?
Well, that's a surprise. We'll figure it
It's
out as we
always
go.
it's always a surprise. So, but back to everything that we're discussing, and I guess the point that I was gonna bring up is the central bank being totally different setup from way back in the day to what it effectively, when you fast forward to 1913, what it effectively became, and what the Federal Reserve, it seems like the whole point of it was absolute monetary manipulation and monopoly on everything. Like it's not even about land speculation or just controlling certain aspects of the money situation, but actually just being a money printer, pretty much.
Well, certainly the Fed has taken advantage of everything that's gone wrong in our economy to increase power to itself, whether that was swings in the boom bust cycle or problems of currency redemption, currency standardization, access to credit. Every time something has gone wrong in the U.S. economy, the Fed has positioned itself as the solution. And now we see over the past 100 years that the Fed has effectively overreached, notwithstanding what one might argue are good intentions by most of the powers that be inside the Federal Reserve System. It has proven it is utterly incapable of living up to its purported mandate to control monetary policy in a way that smooths out the boom bust cycle and thereby creates an environment in which our economy can grow more steadily and therefore in the long run more rapidly, robustly, more efficiently. It just has proven it can't do that. And so this is why I'm a big proponent of replacing. Well, I believe that we need to replace the Federal Reserve System lock, stock, and barrel. But as a first step, what's really critical is that we take away the Fed's discretionary authority over monetary policy. I believe that we need a rules-based system. For my money, pardon the play on words, my feeling is that the best way to do that is what Milton Friedman advocated so many decades ago, which is a constant growth rate to the money supply, and get the Fed out of the idea of targeting a particular rate of inflation. If you had a constant fixed, announced, unchangeable growth rate to the money supply, you would be able to observe, investors in the market, most importantly, would be able to observe the changes in pricing levels, inflationary or deflationary. You would know that those are the results of actual economic phenomena that are happening inside of our economy. It wouldn't be the result of, the Federal Reserve System policy changes that cause investors today to constantly try to figure out what it is the Fed is doing, what it's going to do next, try to tease out how much of inflation is because of the economy booming versus how much is because we just printed too much money, or I should say created too much money through the Federal Reserve mechanism. So I'm not one to readily ascribe evil to phenomena that humans create when one might argue they try to do the right thing. Certainly they've gone overboard in this case because they've been power hungry. And sure, that is a form of evil, but the Fed simply cannot live up to what it is it has promised. And so I believe that we need to replace Fed monetary policy. I believe we need to replace the Fed altogether. The regulatory framework it has created needs to be profoundly changed. I think financial institutions need the option to be completely unregulated if they want to, and if they want to be regulated by federal or state or potentially local organization, they can do that in the private sector or the public sector, and they ought to have a competitive environment in which to select their regulator. These are changes that can be made. There is some competition among regulators today, but not enough. So I think that there are deep, profound changes that we can make to our banking system and monetary policy in particular, to your point.
Yeah.
No, I think like the whole idea of free banking, it worked. It actually worked in this country until the National Bank Act was put in place and government interventions and a war got into the way because of other issues. But free banking essentially does work from my perspective. I mean, it allows, if somebody deposits a share of something, well, I mean, like make it a depository for, say, gold, you deposit your valued goods in there and get your receipt back. I mean, that bank's going to have to ensure they're going to be incentivized to keep you as a partner and not over what's the word I'm looking for, over extenuate their
overexposed.
or overexposed.
Right.
So,
and we see today that when the government participates in that market, they actually typically do more harm than good. I appreciate that the FDIC was created for a reason. I appreciate that it's financed by the banks themselves. It's backed up by the Treasury Department. It's financed by the banks themselves. The FDIC does not need to be in the public sector. If banks want to participate in an insurance program in which they pool their resources, they can do that without the backing of the Treasury Department. I would privatize the FDIC and see how many institutions want to continue to participate in that. And maybe you need more than one form of the FDIC. Maybe there's a regional competition there that could take off. I'm not convinced that it's a natural monopoly. But having said that, yes, competitive banking institutions It's something that we should see as a bedrock element of our competitive economy. We shouldn't be in the business of having states or the federal government tell people who is allowed or not allowed to create a banking institution, or what kinds of regulatory framework that they should have to participate in.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it goes for any business, but go ahead, Andrew.
I would say, liberty and power, divergent points of view, and the more power grows, the more the better chance at overheating, and it brings into context why we need liberty. If you think back to like after World War II, they're like, why did we put all these people, all these Japanese people in camps? That this is not who we are as a person. But in the pursuit of that power, we lose sight of who we are as a people. And that's, the banking industries bringing everybody on the same page forces that power to continue to grow until it's too hot to handle.
Well, you're absolutely right. Our government is too powerful and it's too concentrated, which adds to the federal government's ability to manipulate every element of our economy. It's a real shame. I think that we have an opportunity in 2024. It's why I'm participating in the presidential election process. I think we have an opportunity in 2024 because more Americans than ever before are waking up to the idea that their government does not behave, does not operate in their interest. People are waking up to the idea the federal government does not operate in a transparent, forthcoming way, that the government operates in the shadows, dishonestly, in the interest of the politicians who run the government. And because people are waking up to this idea, and because most Americans have a libertarian streak, they wouldn't call it that. Most Americans can't spell libertarianism. But because most Americans have a libertarian streak, I think that there's naturally a huge opportunity. And as I say, more than ever before. The other reason I think that we have a huge opportunity in 2024 is because the political leadership that exists today is objectively, empirically speaking, crappy. Polling data show that many people that identify as members of the Republican Party don't like the individual who is the likely presidential nominee from that party. And many people who identify themselves as members of the Democratic Party don't think it's a good idea for the incumbent president to run again. So given the political landscape, we have a huge opportunity. Given where our government is going in terms of fill in the blank, in terms of dishonesty, the concentration of power, the growing levels of authoritarianism, the counterproductive ways that our economy is manipulated, people are increasingly aware that a lot of the bad things that are going on in our nation are the result of bad public policy. That inflation doesn't just grow on a tree. It's the result of somebody doing something stupid. And it undermines our ability to make our way financially, fiscally, to live your life by your own standard. And so I think that we have a big opportunity, and I think it's an obligation. I think it's an obligation for people who are liberty-minded to participate in the process and to take advantage of the opportunity. If you're waiting for a Republican to lead the charge back toward a delimited powers style of constitutional, pluralistic, democratic republic government, you're waiting for something that's not going to happen. And if you're waiting for the Democratic Party to offer up some sort of a campaign that's going to stand up for your individual liberty, that's not going to happen. You're waiting for something that is, story time. That's not reality. And so in that sense, I think it's an obligation for a representative of the Libertarian Party and libertarianism more generally with a lowercase l to help facilitate a movement that undermines the duopolistic way that politics is conducted in America. Would you agree with that?
No, I definitely agree. I think politics is, in my opinion, the absolute sickening reason why we've gotten to this point. I mean, there's too much politics, and I think you said it, Mike, like most Americans want to be that fiscally conservative yet liberally
Socially liberal.
free. Yeah. I mean, based on their life, they want to be left alone. They just want to live their life, provide for their families, and just live. So everybody's a libertarian until they're not a libertarian because politics.
Yeah.
No, I agree. I agree. And I think that there's a pinprick to the balloon that needs to be made that can let all of the hot gas out. I think that we're just waiting for someone to show that it's all a house of cards,
Hmm.
that the emperors, plural, the two emperors have no clothes on, to mix the metaphor. I, the reason the parties have so much power is because people believe that they have so much power. It's because people believe that a third party cannot challenge them. And once they are effectively challenged by a third party, not just an independent, but a real party that can have
Hmm.
lasting effects, I think the duopolistic nature of our politics is going to change. I think it's going to change rapidly, and I think it's going to change permanently.
Now, if only the Libertarian Party, especially up top, would just not fight each other, especially on
If
Twitter.
only we could stop fighting each other. I think that I think there is a possibility of that. I've spent a lot of time in my distant background consulting with nonprofit organizations,
Hmm.
and I have learned that one of the great things for any business is a unifying objective. In most for-profit companies, that's the bottom line, right? Everybody understands that we're here to make money.
Hmm.
And so it's a little bit easier typically in a for-profit business to identify this is your role, this is your role, but together we're all trying to maximize the bottom line of the organization. And in nonprofits, sometimes that objective is not so clear cut. And when it becomes murky, people,
Hmm.
what do we do? How do we do it?
Hmm.
What's my role? What's your role? It can get a little messy. And I think that many political parties, especially ours, especially Libertarian Party, have a problem with figuring out what the right goal is. And I think the Libertarian Party needs to come to terms with our goal is to get people elected to public office. And that there are other good things that people should do, but the Libertarian Party is probably not the appropriate vehicle for those other things. So if you want to participate in the culture wars, you should go knock yourself out, right? But the
Hmm.
Libertarian Party itself is not set up as an appropriate vehicle to do that. And I think some of that mind wandering that goes inside of our party and other parties is particularly powerful, particularly problematic in our party, because we have not been able to convince each other and ourselves that we can be winners, that we can get people elected, that we can affect American politics, that we can force politicians to take into consideration our values. And once we do that, once we convince not just the outside world, but inside each other, inside the party, once we realize in our own heads that we can really be a player, that we can be winners, that we can affect policy, that we can win races, that we can get people elected, I think that that is going to be a turning point for our party when people rally around that being a reasonable objective. that should be our singular objective, just like other parties, to get people elected. And that has to leverage something as large as a presidential campaign. The reason there's an opportunity is because there's a presidential race. Were there no presidential race in 2024, 2024 would be like any other year. But there is a presidential race, and that's a vehicle for getting a lot of media attention, getting a lot of attention on our values, on our party. But you have to participate in the race, and that means running a campaign that is credible, that people can imagine. You know, it would be a weird thing, but could at least imagine you going all the way and competing hard. Otherwise, they're not going to pay any attention. If you don't clear the threshold of credibility, why should anyone pay attention? Your philosophy can be the greatest thing since sliced bread, but that, you know, if you're running a campaign based only on philosophy, you could do that in 2023 or 2025. There's nothing special about the presidential race. The reason that there's a special opportunity in 2024 is because there's a competition. And so you have to demonstrate that you're in it to win it and that you can participate competitively.
And speaking of the competition, what's intrigues me about this race, and I'm not a voter. I'm like, I've divorced from that. And I mean, I take my agoristic point of view very serious, but what I've watched is the competition that really has looked like it's unfolding. You have a guy like RFK coming in, RFK Jr. coming in on the Democratic side. You have obviously a huge scope of the Republican base just converging on one another. Of course, most of them just sound like the same thing, in my opinion. And then you have Cornel West jumping in on the Green Party ticket. That gives an option. And then you have the Libertarian Party with a full throsh of competition between you and Michael Rectenwald and I think who else? Lars, I forgot his last name. Chase Oliver, Joshua Smith, even he's trying to get up in there. I mean, you're seeing competition, and because there is a race for this desire towards trying to figure things out, you know, I mean, and this is the best opportunity, especially the last 4 years. I mean, to end the Trump regime and begin COVID, and then what Biden has done under his regime, and we're back into more forever wars. I mean, COVID, the COVID laws and guidelines and all that whole thing was a complete disaster. And it's harmed so many individuals because of the forced medical procedures that people would have to use. So I think this is the best opportunity if you're going to get into that realm because of that, because 2024 could be a peak year, or it may just be simply put, just another presidential election. But I mean, regardless, it seems like you're at like a crossroads of this might be the time to jump in and get another voice into the realm rather than the two-headed dragon that's always been.
I think you're right. Notwithstanding the fact that you're also right that you just don't know how the future is going to unfold. It could be just like any other presidential election. It is completely a possibility. I don't think that it will be. I think it's going to be different. I think that it's not going to be about small things. I think the presidential race is going to be about big things. It's not going to be about, for example, what should the retirement age be for full Social Security benefits? It's really rather going to be about who has the guts to stand up and say that a pyramid scheme of this nature that attracts youngsters into it to support the overhang of retirees, that's unethical. That is evil.
Yeah.
And so I think it's going to be an ethical battle. It's not going to be about, should we be giving Ukraine 150 billion or should we throw them another 150 billion? It's going to be about foreign aid is ineffective and ethically problematic. It's not an ethical proposition to take money from Americans forcibly and give it to people outside of the United States when we do not have a strategic interest. It's just a matter of our politicians think it's in their interest to wage a proxy war to degrade the army of Russia. I think that that's an ethical problem. I think it's an ethical problem for us to run a policy of strategic ambiguity toward Taiwan. It's not merely a debate over how many ships should be in the China Sea. It's about, do you have, as an American citizen, a right to have your government put forward a foreign policy that aligns with your values? That's what this is going to be about. It's not going to be about, who has the best 3 paragraphs describing a 2-state solution for Palestine. It's going to be about who has the guts to stand up and say the United States has played a role in screwing this up, and we're not going to do that in the future. That if the parties that are interested, that are geographically proximate and strategically interested, want to come together, we will facilitate that. We can participate that. We could even participate in peacekeeping if you guys come up with an idea. But we are going to be out of the business of providing funds, military resources, weapons, ammunition, troops, ships. We are going to be out of the war business regarding the Middle East and around the world. We are going to stop wasting our resources, and we're going to stop representing the American people in a way that is not aligned with the way American people feel. The American people are naturally libertarian. They are not naturally warmongers. They are not naturally the type of people that want us to go around starting wars everywhere. We have been embarrassed by the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. This is an ethical problem on how many levels? We killed over 1 million people in the Middle East in the last 20 years. To say that that's an ethical problem would be a stupid understatement. But the fact that we did so in contrast to American interests, yet in Americans' names with Americans' resources, man, that is evil shit. That is really bad. And we've got to cut it out. I also think that on an empirical level, Americans are waking up to the idea that our military interventionism, we're just not good at it. If you set the benchmark at achieving things that are in our long-term strategic interests, we're just not good at it. We're good tactically. We're good at blowing things up, destroying things. We're good at killing people. We're good at taking land and holding ground. We're good at opening sea lanes and protecting trade at a tactical level. But as far as achieving things that the American public would point to and say, that was a good idea. Sure, it cost us billions or trillions of dollars. It cost us thousands or millions of lives, but it was still worth it. There just aren't examples anymore. And we're going to have to admit that what we're doing, objectively speaking, doesn't work. And it's ethically problematic and misaligned with our values as Americans.
I would actually almost say the only time the United States has ever won a war was a war that they also lost, and that was the American Civil War. I mean, but on a modern sense, I mean, on the military interventionism, we haven't really won a war since World War II.
That's right.
Yeah, I mean, North Korea was a stalemate. I mean, effectively created a rift between the peninsula and put us put us entrenched in South Korea for eternity, and isolated the communists to the north. Vietnam, that was obviously a disaster, and brought many GIs home completely gone. I mean, not right. I mean, if they didn't
And
die,
dozens of thousands didn't come home.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, so like I was speaking of Vietnam, like my mom had two when she was a little girl, but she had two neighbors, um, two young guys, very good people, very good young men, and they both went off to the end. I guess they both got drafted. One didn't come back, and the other came back not the same. Like he was not, he was a totally different person, and that's what we're seeing. Like when it comes to these wars, this is what you're seeing. You're seeing endless death and destruction on just astronomical levels with the people that we're slaughtering over there, and then our own GIs coming home not right if they come home. You're putting the country in trillions of dollars of debt. We're now ticking at 34 trillion with these forever wars, and that's in for what? I mean, it's destructive. It's disgusting, and it's there's a better alternative. Just stay out of other people's business and focus on the task at hand.
Yeah,
America.
there are better alternatives out there. It's up to us to grab them. And I think it's up to people like you guys and me and others around the Libertarian Party and that are liberty minded around the nation to push those ideas. As I said, if you're waiting for a Republican or Democrat to do it, you're waiting for something not going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
It's up to us to pick up a shovel.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Why isn't there an audit of people's positions within political parties and it's diverted to new political parties every 6 years, 4 years, or something like that, and make it alternate in a different point of time between election cycles? I mean,
I think that
wouldn't that help kind of diffuse the tension?
well, I think that the political parties would argue that they have churn. I think the political part, honestly, I think the Democratic Party and the Republican Party each believe that they have robust competition for ideas inside of their parties. I think that's what they would tell you.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's how far gone they are, is that they would actually tell you, oh, yeah, we foster a healthy level of intellectual competition inside of our party. And then they would tell you, which of course is just crap. Then they would tell you that between the two of us, we foster a healthy level of intellectual competition with ideas going back and forth between our parties, competing for the support of the American public, which is also full of crap.
Yeah.
And so I think that, yes, we need an actual ability to reset what goes on inside these parties. But the only way that that's going to happen is if we have more parties participating in the electoral process. You cannot expect success when you're structurally set up in a two-party system. That we're learning the hard way. That's not an ethical proposition. I'm just suggesting as an empirical matter, structurally, we're not set up for success.
Very good. Very good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we need a great reset then. Oh,
we need a
really?
great reset.
Just let all the laws expire and all the parties expire, and we'll start over from the beginning with all the lessons we've learned.
Yeah, good luck in getting momentum for that. I think that we need a fundamentally new relationship between us and our government. That's sort of the platform on which our campaign is put together. We call it the Gold New Deal. Our platform has its own website. Now, we've got the MikeTerMaat.com website, which is the basic campaign website. Then we've got goldnewdeal.org. But our idea is that we need to run on a platform that's all about a new relationship between us and government. It's not merely pushing ideas around the edge on what public policy should be, but fundamentally restructuring how we relate to our federal government as well as how our states relate to our federal government and how we relate to our state governments. We believe that we need fundamental change, institutional level change, and not just changes around the edge. And I think that a lot of Americans are waking up to that. I think that more Americans than ever before are open to a very transformational message. Would you agree with that?
Oh,
I
I
believe so.
agree, hands on. Yeah. So no, we definitely need some boundaries per se, and on everybody. So, and that's effectively like I read just on your website, on your campaign website, I read the list like of what of just the simple put. That's what I tell people. Like, just simply go to MikeTerMaat.com and go under the Gold New Deal tab, and then I mean just look at the listing, and then what was the goldnewdeal.org
Yep.
for more information on what you're calling for. But like, yeah, I mean, I think the greater broad scheme of things is public accountability for all public institutions in order to dwindle it down. Because I think if more people are involved in some capacity to know what's going on with their public institutions, whether it's the federal government, your local or state governments, whether it's corporate partners with government, whether it's your schools, whether it's the police, that's what we need. I mean, we need to be more informed in order to be more accountable towards everything that could go airy against all of us if left undone.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. And one of the ways you impose accountability on any organization, but including political organizations, including governments, is greater competition to force the transparency that we need, but also to force the ability for us to replace people from time to time, and to replace organizations themselves. There are so many, especially at the federal government level, there are so many agencies that have outlived what it was that motivated their creation in the first place, right? You know, you've got agencies that I think the politicians that started them might have been able to argue, you know, we're optimistic that this ought to work out. But because they did not have a decentralized mindset, because they did not have a mindset geared toward maintaining accountability, because they did not have a mindset that a competitive framework allowing the private sector to control these functions would be more likely to result in success, because they did not have such a framework, we wound up with these agencies that have absolutely outgrown their initial reasons for being, that have gone off the rails. And you look at some of these organizations, I would put the FBI in this category, that really started right out of the box in a problematic way. You cannot point to the FBI's past at any point in time and say, that was the golden age of the FBI, right? That's where we need to peel back, and we want the FBI to work like it did that year. No, there is no such year for the FBI. It has been problematic since it opened its doors. It was just structured wrong. And so there are some agencies that have to be dissolved and retired lock, stock, and barrel. And I think the American public would be amazed at how easily some of these agencies could be sunset. The FBI is relatively easy in the sense that you can detail its resources out to other agencies, whether it's sending its caseload to state agencies or its anti-espionage function to the Defense Department. The ease with which we could live without all the politically motivated stuff inside Washington, I think Americans would be very pleased at how easy it would be to live without the FBI, but other agencies as well.
And then you got like the CIA, who with I mean, if you read, especially if you read the book The Legacy of Ashes, I mean, the way that the CIA was actually conjured up, and then the law that was put in place, law that was legislated to bring it about, the CIA Act, I think in 1947, it almost remedies. It's very reminiscent towards how the Federal Reserve was put in play, where you didn't have the real true majority because everybody was off on recess pretty much. And they were still able to pass it in order to get the law passed. And then the CIA was created, and obviously
and without accountability.
It has no accountability. Yeah. Besides, it has to report to the president.
And that's about it. And you've got the occasional classified briefings on the Hill. Then you set up its own, court systems for granting warrants and such. It's really horrible. And then operating outside of the United States without court supervision, it's really hell. There are any number of changes that we can make to our federal government, but some of these changes are really large and wholesale. And I think the American public is ready to hear a much more transformational message than ever before. So thanks for plugging it. I think that people should check out goldnewdeal.org and MikeTermaat.com. And I think you'll see that we have a real opportunity in 2024.
Really appreciate you coming on with us and visiting us today.
Definitely. Thank you for coming on, Mike.
Thank you. It's an absolute joy to be with you guys.
And it very informative too. So like I said, I'll plug it again. So go more information of the Gold New Deal policy and making, goldnewdeal.org. And then you can always check out Mike's campaign, and basically a typical campaign website with some alternatives. So learn something, some videos on there that have been dropped that you can listen in and learn the issues, but definitely go to goldnewdeal.org for some more information on his policy plan on kind of bringing what his plan is to bring liberty-mindedness back to America, right? So again, love that Mike Ter Maat came on. It was fantastic that we had him on, and thank him again. And I love it. I love it that we're able to branch out and be able to get folks like that to give their perspective. I mean, like I said earlier on in the episode, me and Andrew, we're agorists. We are straight anti-politic, anti-participation in the system, but at the same time, sometimes you gotta branch out and gravitate towards the perspectives of others, because maybe there is a means to an end and trying to utilize the system to gravitate us back, because it's gradual, right? Ain't that right, Andrew? It's gradual.
That's right.
Yeah, you can't just straight up watch the state collapse. Like, don't be a collapsitarian, because you have to have a plan. You can do that for yourself. You can definitely divorce from everything for yourself if you're ready and prepared to self-sustain and become more sufficient in your own life in order to attain things. But and focus on bettering your own situation on the individual level. Like I literally, actually, I saw a Massey tweet, then I quote tweeted it, and he said something like, make America smart again. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna play with this. So I quote tweeted him. I said, make America quasi-anarchist again. Make America quasi-anarchist again. Because like Mike said, most Americans are very libertarian minded. They just want to be left alone. So but with that, before I jump into my rambling and my rant to end this, so we can actually go ahead and end this episode, thank you, Mike, again for coming up on the Legacy Right and truly showing that our very successful podcast is trying to branch out to become very failed, like you, Tom Woods. We're coming at you. We want to be failed just like you, Tom. And remember, for people that don't understand the joke, failed means successful. So
inside out.
Exactly, inside out. So, in your corner, Andrew, anything else to wrap up?
No, I think it was a really successful episode. I really appreciate that he came on.
Oh, I think it was wonderful that he came on. So, it's just like I said, perspective and get the details of everything that we can to embrace liberty and decentralization away from the state. So, but with that, and I didn't do the intro, man. I kind of just cut right into it, did the plug, and then we jumped into it. It was a different episode. So, and I forgot to dedicate it. You know how I got to do, Andrew. As we out, at least we can do it at the end. I do it at the end all the time as well. But this has been another classic episode of The Legacy Right. Thank you once again to yet another special guest appearance, Mike Ter Maat, 2024 Libertarian Party presidential candidate. Wish the best for him and wish the best for the movement of liberty, regardless of where you lie up in, whether it's the partyarchy or whether it is libertarianism with a tiny L. Best of luck and best of luck to all that want to maintain liberty for this country and for the world. This has been me.
The Legacy, right?
Yeah. There you go. There you go, Andrew. This has been me and Andrew once again. I am Buckeye Zach, as Andrew would confirm and refer to me as, because it's OHIO. I am Zachary Kaiser. I am the legacy of Jennifer Lee Ent Kaiser. This is Andrew Joseph. And let's wrap this up for another good old message of the liberty movement. Peace.
See ya. Thanks for listening.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Pete Okerlund, and I'd like to welcome you to WCW Nitro.
You know, brother, you think you got what it takes to beat Hollywood Hogan, who wants to climb in the ring and try out the largest arms in the world. Hollywood style.
You want to wrestle an inch more Ric Flair, you gotta be able to walk that out and style and profile. Woo! You really think you're ready for the spin? You really think you're ready for the Scorpion Deathlock? You think you're ready for a fatal encounter?
This is why they call me the total package. Do you have a pain threshold to withstand the butcher rack? Let's find out.
Hallo, hier ist Alex Wright. Wenn ihr High-Flying Wrestling Action wollt, Spinning Sidekick, Top Turnbuckle Dropkick, dann nehmt mich. Der Sieg ist euch sicher. Versprecht euch.
Oh yeah! Watch the flying elbow drop off the top rope. Not only beat people 1, 2, 3, but I hurt him real bad.
It only takes one of 1,000 holds. I think you're man enough for the challenge.
You better be ready to wrestle, because you know, when you get in the ring with Eddie Guerrero, it's going to be high-flying and exciting.
Hey, anytime you feel froggy, man, I'll slap on the buzz killer and rip your shoulder right out of socket. Wolfpack style!
Hey, funky boy. Like there's a choice here? Good God! Pick the man with the plan. Pick DDP.
Hey, all you suckers out there, you wanna play the game? You wanna play with the big boy? Put your feet on the button, cause when you go down 110th Street, it's gonna be on like neck bone, sucker.
This is Booker T from Harlem Heat, hardcore OG brother from 110th Street. The minute you pump,
got the guts to step up to the plate, push the plate.
Yo, Chico, you selected Scott Hall? Get ready for a wild ride on the outside. Hey there! How'd you like to get power pop? Come on, pick me. I'm begging you, pick me. Please pick me.
You think you got the courage to step in the ring? I think you're gonna wind up with a snap neck with a choke slam.
Technical wrestler, high flyer, brawler. It don't matter what you consider yourself to be. When you're in the ring with the crippler, you're a loser.